All right, thanks for coming out. Yeah, I'm Amelia Guimarin. I work for Spatial Research and Design. We're a UX consultancy here in Vancouver. We do UX, we do strategy for a lot of different clients, big tech like Meta. Lululemon's one of our clients, BC Gov, and also some crown corporations like BC Hydro. Yeah, and I'm a senior consultant and researcher there. And Matthias.
Yes, I'm also a researcher, service designer. Um, I'm also part of, for example, the Vancouver design community and organize other stuff like the global service channel. Yeah.
Yep, and we are here today to talk about can robots do your job? And unfortunately, it's not. I'm not giving a demo for a sassy, sarcastic robot to clean your house. We are actually going to be talking about how to use AI for UX research. So even if you're not a UX researcher, if you work in UX or design, product, anything that deals with customers and experiences, you probably need to get some insights about those people to help you do your job better, to help you align your work more towards your organization's goals. So you're probably thinking like, how can I do that more? And there's a lot of things out there promising that AI can do it for you. We are here today to talk about where it can and where it can't. And so this should be helpful for anyone who works with users and wants to get more information and insights about them. So first off, we're going to talk about AI and UX, what it does, how it's being used right now. We will actually ask you what your familiarity with it is and your background a little bit, like what kind of role you're in, how you use it, just to kind of gauge what our audience is familiar with. And then Matthias will share with you the results of a study that we did where we gave various AI tools the task of planning and running a UX research study, and we compared that to actual humans doing the same thing. And then that leads us into our framework, and that's the framework for using AI for UX for research, but also I think it's important for other purposes as well. And finally, we're going to open up to discussion. We'll take your questions, and then we have a few questions for you all too, to talk to us about, talk to each other about, and continue the conversation. So AI for UXR, UX research. What do you all know about AI right now? What are you using it for? How does it work? Anyone want to start and give any examples of what they're using it for? Yes.
Summarizing meeting notes.
Okay. Okay.
Writing emails professionally or non-professionally.
Yeah, writing emails. Anyone for research stuff using it? Yeah.
Using for like recordings and organized summaries for your key points for the user interviews.
Yeah, summarizing interviews. Yeah.
Using to find themes into research that data when it's not structured.
For unstructured data. Yeah. For big data sets or qualitative, smaller.
Medium size.
Medium size. Yeah. Awesome. Most of our stuff is going to be about qualitative today. And this slide is just a little bit about what it's being used for, which you already sort of said, transcription and tagging, sentiment and pattern analysis, finding some of those themes. It can even be used for generating research plans, hypotheses, like discussion guides, reports. We did that with it to varying degrees of success and with some tips that Matthias will be sharing for doing that. And then this is just a list of tools that are specifically use AI. There's a lot of other things that you may already be using, like Copilot if you use Microsoft, Google Gemini, things like Condense, Dovetail have now AI features built in. They weren't like AI first, but these are a few AI first. You all know ChatGPT. There's Anthropic's Claude. Dscout wasn't AI first, now more and more AI. Maze, Marvin, Wondering. Yeah, these are all just a bunch of tools that are out there. So we're not going to be talking about word tools like what does what too much today, but we did look at these and sort of try them out. All right. So AI versus humans. I'm going to hand it over to Matthias to talk about what we found.
Perfect. Yeah, so it's not really finding better, just finding robots like Terminator. Um, but we were basically starting at a point where, okay, AI is a thing now, which was for some time, and what to do with it, right? How can we as research professionals take advantage of it, and how can we kind of see where it makes sense from a research point of view, but also business point of view to integrate it into processes and to create efficiencies or make life easier, right? That's what we want. Technology should make our life easier. And so from there, we were like, okay, now we have what we want to do. How are we going to do this? Then we were thinking of the main research we normally do is qualitative. So and it's like where really kind of the bread and butter of user research very often is. So we thought of, let's do a study that will be done 100% by a human, and then in shades as much as you can to really like get to the completely done by AI, even if there's like no more user, right? Like doing like a synthetic user research at the end of it, and really going full blown AI or seeing like in the steps of the research project where it makes sense and how it feels, what is the output, how can we compare this to the things we got from the human researcher. And 4 main points were there like time, right, effort, quality, and costs, which is again looking at that from a business point of view. Also to do with making it work within a business setting, right? You need to know where to go with that. Yeah, we did like today. We're not going to go into all the details because we did actually a comparison of tools. There's like Amelia mentioned a few. There's way more. Everybody's trying to do their thing with AI, right? Some have a better integration, some worse. We are not here to judge it today. But they're out there and you can try them, right? And you can see it for yourself. I really encourage everyone to go there and see what's out there. And we're going to go into today and look at a little bit more into detail of the main processes in a normal research project, right? So it's you need a plan. You need to execute this plan, which means conducting research, and you need to analyze your data. And then most of the time, as I know, you have to write a report and give this over to stakeholders, which makes sense, right? So we basically looked into what are the tools out there, and for example, we created we really tried to separate the person who's doing the AI from the human person who is doing the research. So we kind of didn't try not to cross-contaminate, as they say, the research, so we could really compare at the end. And from there we went into the form of technology of today. How did it go? This is the big question. So we're going to go over this kind of a little bit step by step, so you get like a little sense, and we kind of bring it together, right? First, planning the research. We use mainly for that, and you can see this data like what kind of everybody's using at the moment is like LLMs, right? Like large language models like Claude, AI. We also tried, because so one premise was there too, like I don't want to have to work too much with the AI, because then the time efficiency I would win get lost, right? So I really want to see like how much in depth do I have to go to get good results, right? So we didn't really go too deep on like reframing prompts. I just want to mention that because it's kind of important, right? Good. When we asked for a research plan with the information we had, right? They were very ambitious. they wanted to do us like a 7-month project. I don't know if you ever had time for that in your work. We didn't. It's we tried several different tools, different prompts, and see what it gets us. Some were like a little bit shorter. Some were like ChatGPT, for example, gave us like 14 weeks. But then we specifically said like kind of the scope of it. They wanted to integrate data collection. They wanted to do like quantitative research. They wanted to do us surveys and data analysis. Was like way too big a scope of the team size we had and the actual insights we wanted to generate, right? So here's like, for example, one AI generated plan, right? So that like we did a literature review and also used tools for that, for example. So that's what I want to get, but I organize this comparative study, expert interviews. That's what we did. Client surveys, and then the prototype framework development. So like a whole big of a lot, which is like a nice to have, but in reality it wasn't really doable. Budget and resource constraints. So from there we went into producing research materials, right? So we were like settling on, okay, we need to do expert interviews, and the interviews interviewed a wide spectrum of designers, researchers, and AI like front runners who were like in the industry, like doing a lot of things that are not like kind of very AI enthusiasts, but like kind of future thinker, right? So we're like really a little bit more forward. So we wanted to have like a really broad picture of that. The generated discussion guides from the AI generated discussion guides was very big picture, very themed, and it wasn't very flowy, right? Like, I don't know who of you here is also a researcher, but like there's an art form in doing good research or just good discussion guide where you have like a flow where you have a conversation and not like just asking questions like a robot, right? And AI did that. There's like questions, like we had like a semi-structured interview, which was like way more like, as I mentioned, like a conversation we could have, and we could like go really in depth with our experts. AI did like really like almost a survey, and it wasn't really able to go any more further. It had like good themes. It was also too long, too broad. Like, but it had like questions like, for example, what do you see as the main benefits of using AI in UX research? Or in your opinion, how can we ensure that AI-driven research remains unbiased and inclusive? So it was like basically prompting or leading questions, right? And that's not good. That's not good questions. You don't want to have these kind of questions, right? So that was like that, but it was really fast and it was like really broad. Like I was going to sound a little bit pessimistic, but it's not that. It's just like really comparing right now research and showing off where it's kind of still lacking, right? In at least the results of this study. Then we went even further and said, okay, there are tools that actually let us sit back and have AI conduct interviews. Let's see how that works, right? We basically and for that, for example, we used the research question or the discussion guide from human-made discussion guide because it was just more fluent and better questions. But even there, the AI tool we were using were really more about like asking the questions, but then it was like really bad in following up, even though you could kind of program it too. And for these interviews, we did a little bit more in-house. So we also interviewed, or we didn't, AI interviewed Amelia, and she can maybe explain how that felt.
So I made a little video. It's not actually from the study. It's just a sample of one of the tools we use. This is the platform Wondering. I went through their setup process and was asked for a bit of information. They asked for my name, my research questions, and then the AI tools wrote this discussion guide and gave me a link to conduct sessions. It's like, share this with people to conduct sessions. So you can see here that it says, hi, my name is Amelia Guimarin, but that's not me. That's just a web interface. It says it wants to ask me some questions about what it's like to interact with AI, especially for interviews like this. It will only take a few minutes, and it wants me to share my thoughts openly and honestly. So I'll just play this little video. I click continue. It asks me a question, how I feel, or my answer.
I think it's a little weird to be interviewed by an AI, especially because the way this is set up, it just said, hey, I'm Amelia and we're going to do this. It didn't say that an AI was going to be interviewing me. I mean, I kind of got that from the context. But yeah, it's a little weird because it's acting like almost like it's a real person. So that was a bit weird.
So now it's thinking about my answer, and it will reply that it understands, and it will follow up and ask me how it could have been better, because we've programmed it to follow up.
If this had said, hey, I'm Amelia Guimarin, and I'm going to be using this AI agent that I programmed to interact with you to do this interview, that would feel better.
And then it thinks about it again, and it follows up a second time, but you'll see it basically just asks the same question again about how could it have been better.
I am not going to speak as like a participant, but more as a researcher. If there was a little bit more friction in the setup behind the scenes and wondering of like what you're going to say to participants rather than just like, hey, type your research questions and then we'll just get going. There's no rapport building or any of that that is really important to doing research.
And then it politely replies, and it tells me that that makes sense, and the interview is over. Because I just gave it one research question. I just wanted to make this for this example. But you get the idea. It could probably be a lot better, but it would take a lot more input and oversight on my part, like on the researcher's part, in setting it up. And that's kind of one of the overall points we had today. Like Matthias said, in some places we did a little bit of editing prompts, but we tried not to do too much, to just sort of say, okay, AI, just go for it.
And that's just like how the interviews work. Like besides like all the kind of like of good AI UX. The next part especially in this software, which is like still lacking, I guess they're still working on it, but like was also the analysis part, but like before we go there.
Yeah, that's just my quote. I think this is actually me. It's weird and repetitive. Asks about something, I explain it and give an example, and then the next question is, give me an example of that. And I'm like, I just did. Or it asks for, tell me more. And I'm like, I told you everything. Like, tell me more. And I know we sort of sometimes have to do that as moderators, but it doesn't do it as well.
Yeah, it was like, this happened like all the time. Like people were like giving an example and would ask for example, or so kind of weird. Well, I guess it's supposed to be. But like the other part there was like the specific program was also like really not helpful for analyzing, because the analyzing tool gave us literally nothing, and that's a big problem because we couldn't neither like extract the data to analyze it somewhere else. So it's kind of a too much enclosed environment where you couldn't really work with data, right? So kind of I would say a lack of understanding the research process of this. Good. Then we went into analyzing all the interviews we had. Like I don't remember, like 15 or something interviews, which is I'm sure like it's like a lot of data you have, and then we went again to choose. We did the interviews actually in person because like kind of again we had to cross, but then we again separated and didn't talk and did each one their own job there. And there, for example, AI did like a good job in finding like key themes, like high level was like really, obviously really fast, right? So it was like kind of a good way to get like high level insights from a big set of qualitative data, but it missed a lot of the nuanced patterns, right? It was very basic in that sense. The other part was like how it presented the information was kind of, there was like a lack of clear hierarchy of information, and then we asked it for giving us some good supporting user codes, because if you need to sell this to stakeholders, you need good user codes, right? It didn't make any sense. Like most of the user codes were like either not really badly redacted, so it was like really like, because it was obviously transcribed. That was like really good having AI because you can transcribe it really fast, but it wasn't helping in like cleaning up the quotes, or most of the time they were like really out of context, like no idea how they, or they were very like almost saying the same words, right? Like you could see like the algorithm working there, because like if it was about how to drive a car, let's say, just give an example, right? It was, if somebody talked about wheels, it would be a quote, right? But it wouldn't talk about the experience of driving a car, right? So that's why kind of out of there. Then we went into reporting, or like creating reports. And I just mentioned like the AI presented like findings in like kind of high level strokes and summaries. It kind of lacked the full context. Yeah. I later like did like a longer report, and it did basically, there's like two ways of reporting, right? One is like you kind of write an essay, which nobody's going to read, and then it was really good. Then there's like having presentations, which you can present to stakeholders, which is like bread and butter again. Right? And then it was like really confusing. It didn't really structure it well. It was kind of very out of context. Here, just to show you a quote it took out for us. It's saying something, but it's actually saying nothing. Right? It's like a comment, like a general thing. It's not really giving us any, like it's nothing that's specific to the context we were asking, right? And that's kind of where understanding or critical thinking is kind of lacking there, right?
Well, just questions, right?
So this is like how we structured our reporting, or like structure, right? Nice intro, context, and then the recommendation out of that, and like and participant that kind of supports that, and that is kind of how it looks from the AI point of view. So again, it's not bad. Actually, this is a really nice quote that can kind of help to understand AI a little better, I would say. The idea of like using it like a super intern, or like a assistant. Again, it's not necessarily bad, but there's no depth into this. Like if for getting a good context to make the right decisions, right? And then this is like part of the report it wrote, and it basically added methodology we didn't use, just from some studies we had in the desk research. That's not good practice, I would say, right? It was very long. I think we had like 70 pages text, which looks really impressive, but it's not very nobody's going to read that, and a lot of this was repetitive and talking about like the same points over and over. Yeah. So let's go a little bit more like into the comparison, and then we go into the framework we got out of this. Just to really understand, like AI is really powerful for ideation, enhancing creativity, but it's not a kind of replacement for human ingenuity, right? And we're going to go into this in a little bit. Now, based on the time, efforts, and costs, obviously, on the time side, AI is faster. I mean, that's nothing new, but that's the problem. If you want to have high quality, your work spends same or more time on AI to just read prompt or others like find a better tool, right? Like if you have someone who is like experience in doing research in all these different processes, they're very often not as slow. That said, the effort putting in, like, right, you call it like the substantial, like the cognitive effort you're using, everything is like way higher, obviously, because you have to kind of think way more in detail, right? But that's actually a really good thing for AI, like anything repetitive, and we have all these little things that we don't want to do, but we have to because the tool wasn't there yet, right? Like transcribing. I don't know if anybody had transcribed videos, like interviews. I had to at university. It's painstaking and long and terrible. I'm very happy, you know. I'm very happy that this exists because I mean, we save some time and I don't want to spend my brain on that, right? And I think that's what AI kind of should be. But yeah, quality again. The human approach was like way richer, like way more in depth, way more nuanced insights, but also recommendations at the end of the day, right? The AI approach was like very often superficial, and just used more data, right? And sometimes more data is not necessarily better, and that's I think like at least for me also like one thing I take out of that. And then costs. I mean, obviously, it costs more to have a human, but AI has a higher initial setup costs, right? Configuration, then you have to subscribe to the platforms, you have to train the staff. You have to really understand how to use it and in which parts. Yeah, we didn't even talk about ethical issues, environment, right? There's a lot of other things that kind of cost us as a society too, right? But on the long run, obviously, if you integrate it into the right parts, it can be a substantial factor to reduce cost. Yeah. And then this is kind of like, because we were talking about like, okay, how can we and where can we use it in research? And that was kind of what we can update as an overview and recommendations. I'm not going to read all this, but it's really, as you can see, if you know what you're doing, you can really integrate it into kind of all parts of your research teams, make your life easier. And it's also not exactly new, I would say, but it's way more detailed. And I think that's something to really think about. Like with AI, like we often like go in and just do whatever, but we don't have like a really kind of a thoughtful process to it and say like, okay, where and in what parts that it actually makes sense and gives us the benefit we are looking for, right? Yeah. With this,
Okay, so bottom line, what are key takeaways for using AI for UXR? It's a powerful tool. We said that, but it's not a replacement for human ingenuity. Excels in that basic brainstorming, managing repetitive tasks, the transcription, yes. But its effectiveness still relies heavily on human input. We need to give it that strategic direction, that critical thinking. But that's okay because as AI frees up our time from that repetitive stuff, we can use some of that time to be crafting the prompts and to be doing that direction for it. And then that leads us to what's it going to be like in the future. So we think it's going to center around human AI collaboration, like that quote that Matthias talked about, having an intern, having a collaborator. Professionals will guide the what and the why of the UX, and we'll see shifts toward more dynamic and multimodal models, not just LLMs, but other types of AI. But we'll still need people to shape those products, to shape those services. So the how of UX might become more automated, but the main purpose will still be rooted in human interaction. And then finally, this is, we're touching on at the end, but it amplifies existing ethical challenges and it introduces new ones. So existing challenges like around creating good rapport when you're interviewing someone and making them feel comfortable, like the AI did not do that, right? And then new ethical things. It uses a lot of power. It's a lot of these things have been trained on stuff that people didn't agree for it to be trained upon. And so it really requires a lot of oversight and critical thinking. And so that's why we came up with this framework, sort of like what you should do if you're going to be using AI. So this will help you understand and figure out if you should use AI and maybe which specific tool. So there's three parts of it. They're all equally important, but I'm going to start off with understanding and advantage. So what's the reason for using AI and for this tool in particular? So you really need to learn how it works. So you don't have to learn like very, very in depth, but get the basics of what it's doing. Outline the pros and cons, like it uses a lot of energy, but it saves us a lot of time. Define use cases for the system. Like instead of just saying, hey, we're going to use this for research, you want to be like, okay, we're going to use AI to transcribe. We're going to use it as a first pass summary to find some themes. Have your specific use cases of what you're going to use it for and which tools you're going to use for what. And then regularly reevaluate this, like keep informed of any changes to the system, make sure it still makes sense to be using it for what you're using it for. And then that brings us to oversight and safety. So you need to check it for accuracy. Does the data actually support the findings that AI is telling you, or is it making stuff up? Because we found that it has made stuff up. And I've heard other presentations from researchers who said like, yeah, it just like made up a quote that when I went to actually search for it, wasn't even there. So you need to make sure that it's actually accurate. Then you need to perform regular audits for reliability. So is it still doing what it's supposed to be doing? So the difference between accuracy and reliability, accuracy is if something's right, and reliability is if you can consistently rely on it to be right and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing over time. So you need to think of those two things and regularly be checking on it, right? If you have something that's running in the background, like you don't have to check all the time, you don't have to check every transcript, but especially if you're pulling out like a big, like, whoa, here's some great finding it found, go and check and make sure. Ensure privacy and responsible use of data. So you don't want to get personal information or proprietary knowledge out into the wild. That's like the biggest thing with companies of being like, don't put stuff into AI, or universities being like, you can't use DeepSeek. So that's sort of like the basic of doing that. But then also think about, try to understand where those AIs were trained, what inputs are going into them, the people behind them, and pick the most ethical, the ones that you feel like you can trust. So do your research into that. And then you need to periodically scan for compliance, make sure that it's compliant with what you have set out as your standards, and update as needed. Like just, saying like, hey, ChatGPT is now doing this. Maybe we don't want to use it anymore. Let's look for something else. And then transparency and trust. So just like you should be doing if you're not using AI, you should be talking to your team about your methods and your decisions. And so you got to do the same thing. You got to communicate when, where, how, why. Like, okay, we use this when we want to save time by having it transcribe. We do that. Because it saves us time and money. So really explaining why you're using it, and then explaining your oversight and safety precautions. So what are you doing to make sure that that information isn't getting out, and your reasoning, explaining as well your understanding and advantage, explaining your reasoning for using that tool. And then in that will demonstrate the value of like, okay, we're using this tool for this reason, and this is what we're getting out of it. And you, at the end, you have to be honest about the limitations and mistakes. Just put it out there, like this is what it can do, and this is the value it brings, and this is what it can't do. And if it makes a mistake, like in accuracy or reliability, just be upfront about that, because you need to. That's just being a good person and being ethical. And also, like if you're trying to hide it, and I think there's a little bit going on right now with AI of like, oh yeah, it's great, and it makes a mistake. We're sort of like, well, don't look at that. Just look at the great stuff. You need to look at the other stuff as well. Yeah, and like I said, this is just like standards of professionalism that you should be holding yourselves to regularly, and you've got to do it with AI as well. All right, so back to the main question: can robots do your job? So I've got this GIF because maybe we don't need to think about it of robots like replacing us, but rather as helping us, and maybe even saving us from the bad robots in the process. So you can even use what you learned here today to help fix any terrible chatbots, if anyone's had an experience with a terrible chatbot, or a sad AI interface. I'm starting to see them where I'm like, wow, this looks like they just asked AI to lay something out for them. Yeah, and if you care about user experience and you want to make things faster and use AI, have it help you.